Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Super English Talks. My name is Jara, and I am so happy that you are here with me today. Together, we're going on a journey into the heart of the English language. I hope you are feeling relaxed, comfortable, maybe with a cup of tea or coffee in your hand, and ready to learn something useful. Today, we're going to talk about a question that many English learners ask me all the time. The question is, Jara, how can I stop sounding like I'm reading from a textbook? How can I speak English more naturally, more fluently, like a native speaker? This is one of the biggest dreams for many learners. You want to speak freely without stopping to think too much. You want the words to flow from your mouth with confidence. You don't want to feel like you are translating in your head every time you speak. And here's the good news. It is possible, but it does not happen in one night. It is not about learning more grammar rules or memorizing endless vocabulary lists. It is about changing the way you practice and changing the way you think about English. In this episode, I will share some practical tips and real stories. I will guide you through simple things you can do every day that will make your English sound more natural. This is not about being perfect. It is about making small, consistent changes that will help you unlock the fluent English speaker that is already inside you. So, take a deep breath, relax, and let's start this adventure together. And by the way, if you enjoy this podcast and don't want to miss future episodes, make sure you subscribe or follow. Turn on your notifications so you are always updated. That way, we can keep learning and growing together. A story about Carlos. Let me tell you about one of my students. His name was Carlos, and he came from Spain. Carlos was a very smart student. His grammar was excellent. He knew thousands of vocabulary words. He could write long essays that were clear, logical, and well-structured. But when it came to speaking, something was wrong. There was like a wall between all the English knowledge he had in his head and the words that came out of his mouth. He spoke very slowly. He spoke very carefully. He pronounced every word perfectly, but his sentences did not sound natural. For example, he would say, "Hello.
How are you
Today.
or
I am
going to the
supermarket." Every single word was correct, but it sounded like a computer reading text. There was no flow. There was no music. There was no rhythm. One day, Carlos was telling me about a holiday he took in the Swiss Alps. He even showed me a photo of the mountains on his phone. The picture was stunning. The mountains looked so high, the sky was so clear, and the snow looked magical. Carlos looked at the photo and said, "The scenery was very beautiful. The mountains were big." Now, I understood him perfectly. His English was correct, but the words he used did not match the amazing photo I was looking at. Imagine what a native speaker might say in that situation. A native speaker might look at the same photo and say, "The scenery was just breathtaking. The mountains were absolutely huge." You wouldn't believe it. Do you hear the difference? It is not just about the words. It is about the feeling, the emotion, the way the words connect and flow together like a song. Carlos was so focused on being correct that he forgot to be expressive. He was so afraid of making a mistake that his fluency became frozen. The heart of the problem. This brings us to the most important lesson of all. If you want to sound natural, if you want to sound fluent, the first step is not grammar. The first step is not vocabulary. The first step is mindset. You must give yourself permission to be imperfect. Because when you try to be perfect every time you speak, you lose your natural flow. But when you allow yourself to be human, to make small mistakes, You will start to sound more relaxed, more expressive, and more like a real English speaker. Think for a moment about how a child learns their first language. Do children worry about grammar rules? Do they stop and ask themselves, is this the past perfect tense or the simple past tense? Of course not. Children are like fearless explorers in the world of sound. They listen. They copy. They make thousands of mistakes, but they don't care. They just keep going. Maybe a child says, I go to the park. Is it correct? Not really. The correct form is, I went to the park. But what does the mother do? Does she stop the child and give a long grammar lesson about irregular verbs? No, not at all. She smiles and says, Oh, you went to the park? That's wonderful. What did you see there? The focus is not on grammar. The focus is on communication, on connection. What we can learn from children. As adult learners, we need to bring back a little bit of that childlike freedom. We need to be less afraid of mistakes. Because here is the truth. The fear of making a mistake is often the biggest barrier to fluency. It's like a cage that we build around ourselves. It freezes us. We may already know the right words, but we are too scared to say them. We think things like, what if my pronunciation is wrong? What if I use the wrong preposition? What if people don't understand me? And because of this fear, the words stay locked inside our heads instead of coming out. My French story. Let me share a personal story with you. When I was learning French, I had a very similar problem. I remember walking into a small bakery in Paris. The air was warm and full of the smell of fresh bread and buttery pastries. All I wanted was something very simple, a croissant. But I was so nervous. My hands were sweating. I kept repeating the sentence in my head again and again. I worried about my accent, about the rolling R sound. I wanted to sound perfect. Finally, it was my turn. The baker, a kind older woman with flour on her apron, smiled at me and waited. And I froze. The words did not come out. I panicked. I pointed at the croissant and mumbled something that sounded like nonsense. The woman just smiled kindly, held up a croissant, and said,
Un croissant.
I nodded, paid quickly, and ran out of the shop with my face red from embarrassment. All day long I felt like a failure. But later, as I sat by the River Seine eating that delicious croissant, something hit me. I realized I had succeeded.
Why?
Because the woman understood me. She gave me what I wanted. The communication worked. The only reason it felt like a failure was because of my fear. The fear made me feel small. The reality was that it worked. From that day forward, I made myself a promise. I will focus on connection, not perfection. Why this matters? When you let go of the need to be perfect, something magical happens. You begin to take risks. You start trying new words. You experiment with different sentences. And yes, you make mistakes, many mistakes. But here's the secret. Each mistake is not a failure. Each mistake is a step forward on your journey to fluency. Every mistake teaches you something. Every mistake builds your courage. And little by little, your English grows stronger. Your first homework. So here is the very first piece of homework I want to give you. For the next 7 days, I want you to practice speaking English without fear. Just for 1 week, give yourself permission to be imperfect. Find small opportunities to speak. It could be ordering a coffee, asking for directions, or even just talking to yourself out loud in English. And when you speak, I want you to focus on only one thing, getting your message across. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about pronunciation. Don't worry if it is not perfect. Just communicate. Make mistakes. Laugh at them. Learn from them. Because this simple shift in mindset from perfection to connection is the foundation of fluency. It is the ground on which everything else is built. Hand in hand with embracing imperfection comes another very important step, finding your personal motivation. In other words, finding your why. Why are you learning English? Now, a vague answer like, for a better job, is not always strong enough. Because when learning gets difficult, and it will, that kind of answer often does not give you enough energy to keep going. You need a deeper, more emotional connection. Elena's story. Let me tell you about a woman I once coached. Her name was Elena. She was a grandmother from Argentina. Her son had married an American woman, and they had 2 young children. Elena's English was very basic. When she visited her family, she loved being in the living room, surrounded by laughter and conversation, but she felt like an outsider. She could see her grandchildren running around, telling jokes, singing songs, but she could not understand them. She could not read them a bedtime story. She could not ask them about their day at school. Her English level put her behind a wall of silence. And that hurt. But Elena had a very strong why. She wanted to connect with her grandchildren. She wanted to understand their favorite cartoons. She wanted to share her own childhood stories in Spanish, but translated into simple English. This motivation was so powerful that it became stronger than her fear of making mistakes. She wasn't practicing for a test. She wasn't studying for an exam. She was practicing for something much bigger. For a hug. For a shared laugh. For a real connection. And because of that, learning English no longer felt like a boring chore. It felt like a mission. Your turn. So let me ask you, what is your reason? Is it to understand the lyrics of your favorite songs? Is it to travel the world with confidence? Is it to build your career? Or maybe, like Elena, it is to connect with someone you love. Take a few minutes to really think about this. Find your reason.
Write it down.
Put it somewhere you can see every single day, maybe on your desk, on your phone screen, or on your wall. That reason will be the fuel that keeps your engine running, especially on the hard days. Moving on. Now that we have built a strong foundation, a fearless mindset, and a clear motivation, it's time to talk about something practical, the sound of English. Because learning English is not only about grammar or vocabulary, it's also about the music of the language. English has a very special rhythm and melody. Linguists call this stress, rhythm, and intonation. And this matters a lot because it can completely change the meaning of your words. Word stress. Let's start with word stress. In English, not all syllables are equal. In a word with more than one syllable is always stressed more than the others. It's longer, louder, and often a little higher in pitch. This stress can even change the meaning of a word. Javier's story. I once worked with a young man from Colombia. His name was Javier. He was giving his very first business presentation in English. He was extremely nervous, his heart was pounding, his hands were shaking. His topic was the company's financial performance. He wanted to begin by talking about the company's official record of sales. The noun, record, stress on the first syllable. But when he stood up, nervous and stressed, his mind went blank. He began his speech and said, "Good morning. Today I want to record our sales performance." He accidentally put the stress on the second syllable, which turned the word into the verb record. Suddenly, people in the audience looked confused. Some picked up their pens, as if they were being asked to write something down or start recording the meeting. Javier saw the confusion, and of course, that only made him more nervous. He tried again, but he kept stumbling. A simple stress mistake changed the whole meaning of his words. And that is why understanding the rhythm and stress of English is so important. Javier's story shows us something very important. Word stress matters. When he stressed the wrong syllable, the communication broke down before he even got to his main point. Just one tiny shift in stress changed the meaning of his message. Later, when we practiced together, he learned to land on that first syllable with confidence, our chord. It was such a small change, but it made him sound instantly more confident, more professional, and most importantly, clear. And that's the lesson. Word stress is not just for advanced learners. It's not a little extra detail. It's a basic, fundamental part of being understood in English. Word stress examples. This happens all the time. Take the word present. Pierre sent a gift. Present to give something formally. Or the word object. Object a thing. Object to disagree. If you stress the wrong syllable, people might understand you, but they'll feel something is off, and sometimes, like in Javier's case, they may even get confused. The problem is that many learners pronounce every syllable with the same force. But in English, that doesn't sound natural. Let's practice together. Try saying, beautiful. The stress is at the beginning. Beautiful. Now say, important. The stress is in the middle. I'm important. Now say, understand. The stress is at the end. Understand. Feel how different parts of the word are stronger. That strong beat is what makes your English sound alive and natural. Sentence stress. But it's not just about stress in words. It's also about stress in whole sentences. And this is what creates the rhythm of English. English is what we call a stress-timed language. That means we give more energy to the important words, usually nouns, main verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. We make the smaller words like a, the, of, in, is, are, quick and quiet. Let's go back to Carlos. He said, the scenery was very beautiful. He gave every word the same weight, but a native speaker would naturally stress the key information. The scenery was very beautiful. The little words, the, was, very are quick and light. The big words, scenery, beautiful, are the stars of the sentence. It creates a beat, like music. Da-da-da-da-da. That's the rhythm of English. Let's practice.
Try this with me.
Sentence 1. I need to go to the bank to get some money. The stressed words are need, go, bank, money. The rest are quick and soft. Say it with me again. I need to go to the bank to get some money. Sentence 2. She wrote a long letter to her best friend. The stressed words are wrote, long letter, best friend. Hear the rhythm? Da-da-da-da, da-da-da. Practicing this will make a massive difference in how natural you sound. How to practice rhythm. One of the best ways is to listen to native speakers in podcasts, movies, or songs and clap along to the rhythm. Another great technique is called shadowing. This means you listen to a speaker and repeat their words immediately, copying not just the words but also the rhythm, stress, and intonation. Shadowing is one of the most powerful tools for developing a natural flow in English. Intonation, the melody of English. The third piece of the music of English is intonation. Intonation is the melody of your voice, how your pitch goes up and down when you speak. It shows emotion, it asks questions, and it signals when we are finished speaking. If your intonation is completely flat, it can make you sound bored, robotic, or uninterested. For example, listen to this statement. I live in London. The The pitch naturally falls at the end on the word London. That's what makes it sound complete. When we use intonation, we are really using our voice to send signals. It's like music. The way your voice goes up and down tells the listener what you mean, even when the words are the same. For example, if I say, I live in London,
My voice falls at the end.
that tells you I am finished with my thought. But if I say, do you live in London? My voice rises at the end, especially on the word London. That rising sound signals I am asking a question and that I'm expecting an answer. Do you hear the difference? I live in London. Falling. Do you live in London? Rising. This simple pattern, falling for statements, rising for yes/no questions, is one of the foundations of English intonation. Intonation and meaning. But intonation does much more than signal questions and answers. It can completely change the meaning of the same sentence. Imagine I say, that's a great idea. If I use a high falling tone with energy, it really means I think your idea is wonderful. But if I stretch my words and use a low rising tone like that's a great idea, it means the opposite. I am being sarcastic. The words are identical, but the melody changes everything. Intonation and emotion. We also use intonation to show our emotions. If my friend tells me she won the lottery, I wouldn't reply in a flat, robot voice. That's amazing. Instead, my voice would rise and fall with excitement. That's amazing. The intonation shows my feelings. Intonation in lists. Intonation also helps us when we are making lists. If I say, I bought apples, bread, and milk, my voice goes up on apples, up on bread, and then down on milk. That falling tone on the last item shows the list is finished. Let's try it together. I need to buy some paper, pens, and notebooks. Paper, up. Pens, up. Notebooks, down. Do you hear the melody? That little tune makes your speech easier to follow. How to practice intonation. Here's a fun activity. Find a short clip of a conversation from a podcast, a movie, or even YouTube. Listen carefully and, with your finger, draw the intonation pattern in the air. Does the voice go up? Does it fall down? Does it rise and fall? Then try to copy it. Don't just repeat the words, copy the music. It feels a little strange at first, but it's like learning to sing a new song. With practice, the melody will become natural. Connected speech, the next step. Now let's tie this all together with something called connected speech. This is one of the biggest secrets to sounding fluent. And it's something that textbooks almost never teach. When native speakers talk, they don't pronounce every single word slowly and separately. Instead, the words flow together. They link, and sometimes sounds even change or disappear. That's why fast English can be so hard to understand for learners, but it's also what makes English sound smooth and natural. For example, look at this sentence. What are you doing? If you read it word by word, you might say, what are you doing? But a native speaker in a casual conversation almost never says it like that. Instead, it becomes, whatcha doing? What plus or plus you blend into whatcha. The G in doing often disappears. This is not lazy English. This is normal, natural English. A real story. Paolo in London. This issue once caused a big problem for one of my students, Paolo from Italy. Paolo was visiting London for the first time. He was a serious, hardworking student. He knew all the grammar rules, and he had practiced with his textbook recordings. But those recordings were slow and careful. One day, he was standing near Big Ben looking a little lost. He stopped a friendly man and asked politely, "Excuse me, sir. How do I get to the tube station?" The Londoner smiled and replied quickly, "Oh, yes, simple. You're going to want to go right at the corner and then it's just down the road." But for Paolo, it was a disaster. His face went completely blank. All he heard was a blur of sounds. To his ears, it wasn't English, it was noise.
Why?
Because the man was speaking with connected speech. Words were blending, shrinking, and linking together. And Paolo wasn't used to it. Think of it like Lego blocks. If you only have single bricks, you need to build piece by piece, slowly and carefully. But if you already have larger sections built, you can snap them together quickly and create something much bigger in less time. That's what collocations and phrases do for your English. They give you ready-made pieces of the language that you can use instantly, without hesitation. One of my students, Aisha from Morocco, discovered this when preparing for a big job interview. At first, she was trying to memorize single, impressive words like synergy and innovation. But when we practiced mock interviews, she struggled to put them into natural sentences. She sounded forced. Then we shifted focus. Instead of just learning big words, she started learning chunks like play a key role in, gain valuable experience, and meet a deadline. Suddenly, her answers flowed much more smoothly. She didn't have to stop and think so hard. She could just use the blocks she already had. The great thing about collocations is that you can pick them up by listening and reading. Every time you hear or see a phrase more than once, take note of it. Write it down. Repeat it. Practice using it in your own sentences. Over time, these chunks will become part of your natural speech. But vocabulary and collocations are only part of the story. To truly connect with people, you also need to understand the power of register. That means choosing words and phrases that fit the situation. The way you speak to your best friend is not the same as the way you speak in a job interview. In casual conversation, you might say, "I'm going to grab a bite." In an interview, you would say, "I'd like to have something to eat." Both mean the same thing, but the register is different. Mastering register helps you sound not just fluent, but also appropriate and professional when needed. And this is exactly what we'll explore next. To really get good at using new words and phrases, I suggest you keep a language journal. This is a little different from a normal vocabulary notebook. In a vocabulary notebook, you might just write the word and its meaning. For example, beautiful equals nice to look at. But in a language journal, you write more details. You write down the whole sentence you heard, who said it, and what the situation was. You can even write how it made you feel. This way, you're not just learning a word, you're learning a piece of real language that you can remember and use later. For example, imagine you are watching a movie. A character sees a sunset and says, "It's absolutely breathtaking." In your journal, you would write something like this. Word/phrase, absolutely breathtaking. Meaning, extremely beautiful. Where I heard it, in the movie Island Sunset. Who said it? A character watching the sun go down. How it felt. Very emotional and powerful. My own sentence. The view from the top of the mountain was absolutely breathtaking. When you do this, you connect the word to a memory and a feeling. That makes it much easier to remember. Next time you see a beautiful view, the phrase absolutely breathtaking will come to your mind automatically. Now let's go further. Words and phrases are good, but in English, we also use a lot of idioms and phrasal verbs. These make your speech more natural and colorful. Idioms. An idiom is a phrase where the meaning is not clear from the words themselves. For example, "It's raining cats and dogs." If you take it literally, it sounds like animals are falling from the sky. But the real meaning is, It's raining very heavily. Idioms can be funny, but also confusing.
Let me share a true story.
One of my students, Isabel from France, started her first office job in Toronto. She worked very hard and wanted to impress her boss. On Friday, her boss said, "Great work this week, Isabel. I'm heading out now. Can you hold down the fort until Monday?" Isabel froze. In her mind, a fort was a big castle used in a war. To hold it down sounded like she had to defend the office from an attack. She didn't want to look silly, so she just nodded and stayed at her desk. Everyone else left. She sat there late into the night, nervous and tired, almost guarding the office. When the security guard came by, she nearly jumped out of her chair. The next morning, her boss came back and was shocked to find her still there, half asleep with a coffee cup. She explained she was holding down the fort. Her boss laughed and explained the idiom simply means, "Take care of things while I'm gone." Nothing scary at all. That experience was embarrassing for Isabel, but she never forgot the meaning after that. And it shows why learning idioms is so important. You don't want to misunderstand them in real life. Phrasal verbs. Another big part of English is phrasal verbs. These are verbs made of two or more words, a main verb plus a little word, a preposition or an adverb. For example, give up equals stop trying. Look for equals try to find. Get along with equals have a good relationship. Phrasal verbs are tricky because their meaning often changes completely from the original verb. For example, instead of saying, "I will collect you from the airport," a native speaker will say, "I'll pick you up from the airport." Instead of saying, "I will continue working," they say, "I'll carry on working." Instead of, "I will start exercising," they say, "I'll take up exercise." These small words completely change the meaning. That's why they can be confusing, but they are also the language of real life. Native speakers use them constantly. The best way to learn them is the same as with idioms. Notice them, write them in your journal, and practice using them in your own sentences. Over time, they will feel natural. So remember, words are important, but if you really want to sound fluent, you need to collect phrases, idioms, and phrasal verbs. They are the secret ingredients that make English feel alive and authentic. So, we've now covered some of the most important pieces: your mindset, the music of English, word stress, rhythm and intonation, vocabulary and phrases, and the power of listening actively. But there's still one more step you cannot skip if you want to become truly fluent. You have to actually speak. It sounds obvious, right? But many learners spend years studying English, filling notebooks and watching shows, yet they barely open their mouths to practice. They feel nervous. They are afraid of making mistakes. They think, "I'll speak when I'm ready." Here's the truth. You will never feel 100% ready. Speaking is like swimming. You can read about swimming, you can watch videos about swimming, but the only way to really learn is to get in the water. I had a student named Sophia from Brazil who knew this struggle very well. She loved learning English. She read books, listened to podcasts, even wrote in English every day. But when she met a tourist in her hometown and tried to speak, she froze. She could not get the words out. She told me later, "It was like my brain knew what to say, but my mouth didn't want to move." So we made a deal. Every single day, for 5 minutes, she would speak out loud in English. Sometimes she practiced with me, sometimes with a friend, and sometimes just alone in her room, talking to herself about her day. At first it felt awkward, but soon it became a habit. She started small. "Today I went to the market." Then a little more. "Today I went to the market and bought some fresh fruit." The mangoes were delicious. After a few weeks, she noticed something amazing. When she met another tourist, the words came out more easily. Her brain and her mouth were finally working together. This is the secret. You do not need hours and hours of speaking practice at the start. You just need consistent daily practice, even if it's only a few minutes. You can talk to a language partner online, you can join a speaking club, or you can even just talk to yourself. Describe what you are doing.
Tell a story.
Imagine you are explaining your day to a friend. The important thing is that you are using your voice.
Because speaking is not just about knowledge.
It's about building muscle memory. Just like a musician practices scales or an athlete trains their muscles, you need to train your tongue, your lips, your breath to move in English. So the next step of your fluency journey is clear. You must start speaking every single day. Now, let's talk about the most important step of all, practice. You can read grammar books, watch YouTube lessons, and learn hundreds of vocabulary words. All of that is useful. But if you never actually open your mouth and speak, you will never become fluent. Speaking is not just knowledge in your head. Speaking is a physical skill. Think about it like this. When you play the piano, you use your fingers and hands. When you swim, you use your arms, legs, and whole body. When you speak, you also use muscles, your tongue, your lips, your jaw, even your throat. And just like any other muscle in your body, those muscles need training. If you don't train them, they stay weak. That's why sometimes, even when you know the right words, they don't come out smoothly. Your brain is ready, but your mouth is not. So you need to build something called muscle memory. That means your mouth gets so used to moving in English that speaking becomes automatic. One of the best techniques for this is called shadowing. It is simple, but very powerful. Here's how it works. Find a short audio clip of a native speaker. It could be a podcast, a YouTube video, an audiobook, or even a speech. Play the audio and try to speak at the exact same time as the speaker. Not after them, not repeating, but together with them, like a shadow that follows their voice. At first, it feels a little crazy. You might miss words, you might get confused, and your mouth will feel too slow. But if you keep doing it, you will start to copy the sound, rhythm, and melody of English. I'll give you an example. One of my students, Anya from Poland, had a very strong accent. She often spoke in a flat, monotone way, and she felt this made her sound harsh or unfriendly, even when she was trying to be nice. She decided to try shadowing. Anya loved audiobooks, so she chose a book read by a British actor who had a calm, smooth voice. Every single day, she shadowed him for just 10 minutes. She didn't worry about understanding every single word. She focused on copying the sound, the rise and fall of his voice, the way he paused, the way his sentences flowed. The first 2 weeks were messy. She told me it felt like chaos in her head. But she didn't give up. After 1 month, she recorded herself speaking in English and compared it to an old recording. She couldn't believe the difference. Her accent was still there, and that's okay, but her speech now had music in it. She sounded smoother, more natural, and less harsh. A week later, one of her colleagues at work said, "Anya, your English sounds so much clearer and easier to listen to these days." That was the best compliment she could have received. It proved that her practice was working. This is the magic of shadowing. It doesn't erase who you are. It simply gives you new tools to communicate better. Another great way to practice, especially if you don't have a partner, is talking to yourself. I know it sounds a little strange, but it works incredibly well. And the best part? You don't need anyone else, you don't need to be embarrassed, and you can do it anytime. You can start very simply. For example, when you wake up in the morning, narrate what you are doing. Okay, I am getting out of bed now. I'm walking to the kitchen to make some coffee. I think I'll have some toast for breakfast. It seems so simple, almost too simple, but what you're really doing is training your brain to think in English. You are practicing turning thoughts into sentences without translating. Another way to make self-talk more powerful is by practicing storytelling. Human beings connect through stories. Every culture, every language, every friendship, it's all about sharing stories. So if you can tell stories in English, you will sound more natural and confident. A great method for this is the STAR method. Situation, task, action, result. Situation. What was happening? Task. What was your responsibility? Action. What did you do? Result. What happened at the end? For example, let's imagine a challenge at work. Situation. Last week, our main client was very unhappy with our project. Task. I needed to solve the problem and make the client happy again. Action. I called them, listened carefully to their concerns, and then worked with my team to fix the mistakes. Result. The client was satisfied and even praised us for reacting quickly. By practicing stories like this, you not only improve your English, but also prepare yourself for real-life conversations, job interviews, or presentations. So remember, practice is the heart of fluency. Shadowing trains your ear and your mouth. Self-talk trains your brain to think in English. Storytelling helps you build confidence and connect with people. The more you practice, the stronger your English muscles become. And one day, speaking will feel as natural as breathing. For example, let's take this story. Situation. Our client was unhappy with our project. Task. I needed to fix the situation and rebuild trust. Action. I organized a meeting, listened carefully to their concerns, and created a new plan based on their feedback. Result. They loved the new plan, and now our relationship is stronger than ever. This is a simple story, but it's powerful. When you practice telling little stories like this out loud, you're doing two important things. You are learning how to organize your thoughts in English. You are practicing useful grammar naturally, such as transition words, first, then, after that, finally, and past tense verbs, organized, listened, created, improved. Here's an extra tip. Record yourself on your phone and listen back. Yes, it can feel uncomfortable to hear your own voice at first. Many people don't like it, but it's incredibly valuable because it shows you how you really sound to others. You can hear your pronunciation, your rhythm, and your mistakes. And when you hear them, you can fix them. I once had a student named Fatima who used this exact technique to prepare for a very important job interview. The interview was in English, and she was terrified. She told me, "Teacher, I'm afraid my mind will go blank." So, 1 week before the interview, she created her own practice routine. Every day, she stood in front of a mirror for 15 minutes. She pretended the mirror was me, her teacher, asking her questions. For example, she would look at herself and ask, "So, Fatima, tell me about a time you solved a difficult problem." Then, she would answer out loud, following the STAR method. She practiced explaining her strengths and weaknesses. She practiced talking about her past work experience. She even practiced smiling and using her hands naturally while speaking. When the real interview came, of course she was still nervous. That's normal. But something amazing happened. The words came to her much more easily.
Why?
Because she had already said them dozens of times before. Her mouth and her brain had built muscle memory. And yes, she got the job. Later, she told me that practicing in the mirror was the single most helpful thing she did. So my advice to you is this. Do not be shy. Find a private space, your bedroom, your car, even your bathroom if that's the only quiet place, and just talk to yourself. It is safe, it is private, and it is one of the fastest ways to build fluency and confidence. But of course, there is another level. Talking to yourself is great, but to become truly fluent, you must also practice with other people. Because speaking is not only about words, it is about connection. Think of a conversation like a dance. When two people dance, one moves and the other responds. Conversation is the same. You speak, then you listen, then you respond. It's about understanding and being understood. But what happens when the dance is interrupted? What happens when there is a communication breakdown? This happens to everyone, even native speakers. That's why you need a toolbox of useful phrases. For example, if you don't understand something, don't just nod and smile. That doesn't help. Instead, be honest and polite. You can say, "I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you say that again a little more slowly, please? Could you explain what you mean by that word?" On the other hand, if you feel that the other person doesn't understand you, you can check in with them. For example, "Does that make sense? Let me put it another way." In other words, another smart strategy is to confirm your understanding. For example, you can say, "So, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that." This shows the other person that you are listening carefully. And if you misunderstood, it gives them a chance to correct or clarify. When you know these phrases, you feel more confident because you always have a way to repair the conversation if it breaks. I want to share one last personal story with you. When I first started learning Spanish, I was very shy. I lived in a city with a large Spanish-speaking community. At the local market, the air was full of fast, lively conversations in Spanish. People laughed, bargained, shouted greetings. It was beautiful, but I felt like an outsider. I wanted to join in, but I was too afraid to open my mouth. So at first, I just listened. I did this for weeks. At first, I was too scared even to buy a tomato. I would go to the market, stand near the fruit stalls, and just listen to the people around me speaking Spanish. It was exciting, but also very intimidating. One day, I was looking at some mangoes, trying to pick the best one, when an elderly woman next to me picked one up, smelled it, and said in Spanish, "They're very sweet today." My heart started beating fast. This was my moment. I had a choice. I could just nod and smile, or I could try to respond. I took a deep breath and said, in very broken, nervous Spanish, "Yes, they look delicious." Her face lit up with a big, warm smile. She started telling me about her secret recipe for mango salsa. I only understood about half of what she said, but I stood there, listened carefully, nodded, and asked a few simple questions. It was a short conversation, only 5 minutes, but for me, it felt huge. I had broken through my wall of fear. That small interaction gave me confidence. The next week, I went back to the market and bought some tomatoes, speaking in Spanish the entire time. Slowly, through these small, brave steps, I realized something important. The journey to fluency is made up of thousands of little moments like this. Each small act of courage is a tiny seed of confidence. If you practice consistently, those seeds grow into a strong, healthy tree of fluency. Now, let's talk about another important part of consistent practice: finding people to talk with. One of the most powerful tools today is a language exchange partner. But it is not enough to just find someone and say hello. A good language exchange works best as a partnership, where both people feel supported and motivated. I remember 2 students who connected through an app. Sunhae, a young woman from South Korea, and David, a man from Canada. At first, their conversations were awkward. They mostly spoke in English because David's Korean was very basic and Sunhai felt pressure to practice. After a few weeks, they almost gave up. Then they had an idea. They decided to structure their weekly conversations. They agreed that the first 30 minutes would be only English. David would speak English and be a patient, helpful partner. He asked Sunhai questions, gently corrected mistakes, and taught her new phrases. Then, for the next 30 minutes, they switched. Sunhai became the teacher, speaking only Korean while David listened and practiced. This simple structure changed everything. It removed the awkwardness and created balance. They also chose a topic for each conversation. One week they would talk about their favorite movies. The next week, they would discuss the pros and cons of living in a big city. By preparing ideas and vocabulary beforehand, their conversations flowed smoothly. Over time, they did not just become language partners. They became good friends. Sunhai's confidence in English grew because she had a safe, supportive space to practice every week. She could make mistakes, try new words, and learn without fear. This story shows something very important. Learning a language is not only about books or grammar. It is about real interaction, real connection, and real courage. Every conversation, every small step helps you grow. Sunhai learned a lot from her conversations with David. She learned to tell jokes, to share her opinions, and to understand David's Canadian accent. Over time, her confidence grew, and speaking English became more natural. If you have a language partner, try to create a similar structure. Make your sessions organized and balanced so that both people benefit. This turns a simple chat into a powerful learning opportunity. But what about the rest of the week? There are 168 hours in a week, and you probably only spend a few hours with your partner. What do you do for the other hours? This is where the true secret to fluency comes in: learning to think in English. Many learners still think in their native language and translate every sentence into English before speaking. This slows you down and makes you feel one step behind in a conversation. It's like trying to run a race with a heavy backpack. Translation is slow, tiring, and it keeps you from speaking naturally. Fluency happens when your thoughts start directly in English. It may sound impossible, but it is a skill you can train. And like any skill, you start small. Step 1. Label your surroundings in English. Look around you and name the objects silently in your head. For example, wall, window, lamp, book, computer. Do this every day. It may feel too simple, but it works. You are training your brain to connect the object directly to the English word without translating from your native language. Step 2. Make simple sentences in your head. Once you are comfortable naming things, try to describe them with short sentences. For example, the wall is white. The sun is shining through the window. My book is on the table. You can do this anywhere, at home, on the bus, or while walking. You are becoming a silent narrator of your own life in English. Step 3. Move to internal conversations. After narrating what you see, start describing what you are doing and what you are planning. For example, in the morning, you can think, okay, it's time to wake up. First, I'm going to brush my teeth. Then I need to make some coffee. What should I wear today? I have an important meeting at 10 a.m., so I should wear a nice shirt. You are essentially having a conversation with yourself, but all in English. This is where real progress happens. Sometimes you won't know a word. For example, you might think, I need to. What's that thing you use to make toast? Then you look it up. Toaster. Excellent. Each time this happens, your vocabulary grows naturally, and your brain gets better at thinking in English. Doing this consistently every day is like giving your brain a workout. Slowly, you will notice a big change. You will start thinking in English automatically. Speaking will become faster, smoother, and much more confident. When you learn a new word in a natural way, it is much more powerful than memorizing it from a list. This happens when you need the word and find it in context. For example, you hear it in a conversation, a podcast, or a movie, and you use it naturally. This makes it stick in your memory and in your brain. I had a student, May, from China. She practiced thinking in English every day for months. She described her progress, but she was waiting for a special moment, a moment when she would feel the language inside her. That moment came in a very unexpected way. She was in her kitchen, making dinner for her family. She was chopping vegetables and listening to an English podcast. She reached for a glass, but her hands were wet and it slipped, breaking on the floor. Without thinking, she said out loud, "Oops, just oops." Then she froze. She was surrounded by broken glass and stared at it for a moment. Her husband ran in and asked her in Mandarin what had happened. She later told me she felt shocked, not because she broke the glass, but because her first automatic reaction came in English. It didn't come from translating Mandarin to English. It came naturally from her brain thinking in English. For May, that one word, oops, was a sign of real fluency. It was better proof than passing any test. It showed that English was becoming part of her subconscious mind, part of how she reacted automatically. This is exactly the moment you are working toward. I will never forget my own first moment like this. I had been living in Spain for 6 months, studying, listening, and speaking Spanish every day. One night, I had a dream. In my dream, I was in a crowded market, just like one of my small victories before. I was talking to a shopkeeper, arguing about the price of oranges. We were laughing and gesturing, and the whole conversation was in Spanish. When I woke up, I was stunned. I wasn't trying to speak Spanish. It just happened. My brain had started to process the world in Spanish so much that it even started dreaming in it. That's when I knew I had crossed a big threshold. The language had become a part of my mind, not just a tool I used. This is the ultimate goal, to make English a natural part of your thinking, like an operating system running in the background of your mind. It takes time and consistent practice, starting with simple labels, sentences, and small internal conversations. But this is the most direct path to effortless fluency. At more advanced levels, fluency is not just about words and sounds. It's also about understanding the culture behind the language. This is called cultural fluency. Language and culture are connected. The way people speak, what they talk about, what they find funny, and how direct they are, all of these are shaped by culture. To truly sound natural in English, you need to observe, listen, and experience the culture as well. This could be through movies, TV shows, podcasts, or interacting with native speakers. The more you understand the culture, the more naturally you can use the language, and the easier it becomes to connect with people. Understanding cultural fluency can make the difference between having a smooth, successful conversation and having one that is confusing or awkward. One very clear example of this is small talk. Small talk is a type of light, casual conversation. It is very common in English-speaking countries like the United States, the UK, and Australia. We use it with people we do not know very well. For example, a cashier, a stranger in an elevator, or a colleague you meet at the coffee machine. Small talk is not about giving important information. It is about being friendly and showing that you are open to connection. In many other cultures like Germany or Russia, People are more direct. If you go into a shop, you simply say what you want, pay for it, and leave. There is no need for extra conversation. But in English-speaking cultures, small talk is an important social habit. It helps people feel comfortable, polite, and connected. I want to tell you a story about an engineer from Japan named Hiro. He was very talented at his work, and his English grammar was excellent. But he struggled in his American office because of small talk. He said to me, "Jara, my colleagues are so strange. They keep asking me, 'How's it going?' But then they walk away before I can answer. And they always talk about the weather."
Why?
We can all see the weather outside. Hiro did not understand small talk. He thought, "How's it going?" was a real question that needed a detailed answer. He also did not understand why people talked about the weather. What he did not know is that small talk is not about exchanging information. Saying hello, asking, "How's it going?" or talking about the weather is a way to acknowledge someone and share a brief, safe social experience. Once Hiro understood this, everything changed. He learned to respond simply, "Good, thanks. How about you?" He also started initiating small talk himself. He would say things like, "Wow, it's really raining today, isn't it?" He discovered that these small conversations, which seemed unimportant at first, actually helped him build stronger relationships with his colleagues. People started to see him as friendly and approachable. So, learning the art of small talk is important if you want to sound natural in English-speaking environments. You need to know how to start a conversation, which topics are safe, how to end a conversation politely. Another very important part of cultural fluency is understanding politeness and directness. English, especially British English, often uses indirect ways of speaking. For example, a British person might say, "I was wondering if you might possibly have a moment to look at this report." What they really mean is, "Please look at this report now." Or they might say, "I'm not so sure that's the best idea." What they actually mean is, "That's a terrible idea." For people from cultures where communication is very direct, this can be confusing. In Germany, if someone disagrees with an idea, they usually say something like, "I disagree with this idea. Here is why." This is seen as honest, clear, and efficient. People appreciate the directness. But in some other cultures, like the UK, communication is more indirect. You have to be careful how you give feedback. I want to tell you a story about Klaus, a project manager from Germany. He was very efficient and used a very direct style of communication. One day, he had his first big meeting in his company's office in Manchester, UK. His British manager was presenting a new project timeline. Klaus immediately saw a big problem with it. When the manager asked for feedback, Klaus said, "That timeline is impossible. It will not work." The room went completely silent. Klaus could feel the tension. His manager said politely, "Right. Thank you for your directness, Klaus. We'll move on." But for the rest of the week, Klaus felt his colleagues were avoiding him. His manager was polite but distant. Klaus was confused. He thought he was being helpful. Later, I explained the cultural difference to him. In the UK, when someone asks for feedback, it is often an invitation for gentle suggestions, not a direct criticism. When Klaus said, "That is impossible," his British colleagues heard, "You are incompetent and your plan is stupid." A more culturally fluent way to say the same thing would have been, "Thank you for sharing that. I see the logic, but I'm a little concerned about the deadline for stage 3. Could we explore some alternative options to make sure we have enough time?" The meaning is the same, but the delivery is softer and less confrontational. For Klaus, this was a hard lesson, but a very valuable one. It taught him that fluency is not only about speaking correct English. It is also about speaking appropriate English for the culture you are in. Now, let's talk a bit about pronunciation. You do not need a perfect native accent to speak English well. The goal is to be clearly understood. Some sounds in English are difficult for many learners, and practicing them can make a big difference. One of the most famous sounds is the TH sound. There are two types. Unvoiced TH, as in think or three. Place the tip of your tongue gently between your front teeth. Blow air out. There is no sound from your vocal cords. Voiced TH, as in this or that. Tongue in the same position, but this time use your vocal cords to make a sound. Many learners replace these sounds with a T or D. For example, they might say I tink instead of I think, or dis instead of this. This can sometimes cause funny mistakes. I had a student who wanted to say, I am 30 years old, but it came out as, I am dirty. We laughed a lot and then practiced the TH sound until it was correct. Another challenge is vowel sounds. English has many vowels, and some are very similar. A classic example is short I, ship, live mouth relaxed. Long E, sheep, leave mouth wider, tongue higher and tense. The difference is important. Asking about a sheep instead of a ship can completely change the meaning. A good way to practice is with minimal pairs, words that only differ by one sound. Ship, sheep, live, leave it, eat, his, he's. Hear the difference and practice training your mouth to make the correct sound. This is a motor skill. Use a mirror to watch your tongue and mouth if needed. Remember, the goal is not to erase your accent. Your accent is part of who you are. The goal is clarity. You want your pronunciation to be clear so people can understand your ideas easily, without struggling with the words. When your pronunciation is clear, your accent becomes a unique part of your communication, not a barrier. Learning a new language, especially English, is a journey. It is a journey that takes time, patience, and consistent effort. From the moment you decide to start, everything you do builds a foundation for your success. It is not just about learning words or grammar. It is about building confidence, shaping your mind, and creating habits that help you think, speak, and understand in English naturally. Think of this journey like building a house. Each step we have discussed so far is like adding another part to your house. You start with the foundation. This is your mindset. Your mindset is your fearless attitude, powered by your why. Your why is the reason you want to learn English. Maybe it is for your career, your studies, traveling, or connecting with people around the world. This why keeps you motivated even when the process feels slow or difficult. Next, you build the walls. The walls are the rhythm, the intonation, and the music of the language. How you speak, where you put the stress in a sentence, and the rise and fall of your voice all contribute to sounding natural. These are skills that you practice every day, and they form the strong walls of your house. Then you furnish the rooms. This is your vocabulary. Not just random words, but rich, meaningful words that you learn in context. You learn them through your language journal, by noting down full sentences, idioms, phrasal verbs, and expressions that you hear or read. You connect each word and phrase to a memory, an emotion, or an experience, which makes it much easier to remember and use naturally. Next, you install the windows. This is your listening. Listening carefully to native speakers, podcasts, TV shows, or conversations helps you open up and see the world of English around you. Listening is how you understand the rhythm, the natural flow of sentences, and how ideas are connected. A good listener can also speak better, because they know how English really sounds in everyday life. After that, you live in the house. This is your practice. Talking to yourself, shadowing, practicing stories, and having conversations with others. This is where all the skills you have built, your mindset, rhythm, vocabulary, and listening come together. You are actively using English, building fluency, and strengthening your confidence every day. Finally, you make it a home. This is when you learn to think in English and understand the culture of English-speaking countries. Thinking in English allows your brain to react naturally without translating from your native language. Understanding culture helps you communicate in a way that is polite, appropriate, and clear, making your interactions smoother and more enjoyable. Yes, this process takes time. Yes, it can be challenging. But it is also one of the most rewarding things you can ever do. Learning English is more than just speaking a new language. It is about connecting with people, understanding their stories, sharing your own, and navigating the world with new freedom and possibilities. It helps you grow into a more open, curious, and connected version of yourself. Remember, learning a language is like a marathon, not a sprint. You will have good days and bad days. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate every small victory, even if it seems tiny. Every word you learn, every conversation you have, and every time you think in English is progress. To make this easier, I have a simple challenge for you this week. Pick one thing we talked about and focus on it. You do not need to do everything at once. Start small. Maybe you'll start a language journal and write down new words or phrases in full sentences. Maybe you will practice telling a short story using the STAR method: situation, task, action, result. Maybe you will find the courage to start a short conversation in English, even if it feels scary. Whatever you choose, just take one small step. Small steps, done consistently, lead to big results over time. If you want to share your progress or ask questions, you can reach out through the podcast website or on social media. Your experiences are valuable, and hearing about your journey inspires others as well. If you enjoyed this episode and want to keep learning with me, make sure you are subscribed to the podcast and have notifications turned on. This way, you will not miss any future lessons, tips, or strategies to improve your English. Remember, keep practicing. Keep believing in yourself. Be patient and consistent. And never forget why you started. This is Jara, wishing you a wonderful day full of learning, progress, and discovery. Keep moving forward, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Goodbye for now.